Well, we'll get started with the session this morning. Just quick introduction. I know you know Mike, and I'll let him introduce himself anyway. But I'm Mark Rosenberg. I'm from the Aberdeen Regional Extension Center. I am field specialist, agronomy weeds. So guess we're going to spend the morning, this session of the morning, looking at some plant ID and also some herbicide injury. As we go through, these sessions are for you. So if there's questions and stuff like that or other things you want to talk about, please make sure you bring those subjects up and ask the questions, because we'd rather make sure you go home with the answers that you need from today's session. So, but some bookkeeping things. We've got certified crop advisor credits if you want to sign in, and then we'll make sure you get signed out before the session's over. I guess one other thing, we've got water in the cooler. You probably just like the other stations, so help yourself if you do need some water.
We do have porta potties here, but we do prefer you do go to the bathroom in the corn if you can. We need the moisture, if that's all right. So if you don't mind doing that, that'd be good.
You think that's going to make all the difference?
It might.
I don't like to get enough water in that cooler.
Whatever we can take, we'll take it.
Okay. Just to start off with some resources, as far as I think if you're dealing with the producers, most of you have some resources at your disposal, whether it's private or whether it's maybe public access. But I just wanted to real quickly review some resources, I guess, that I use at the office dealing with the weeds. And I guess the one I'd really like to highlight, I don't know how many of you own a copy or have access to a copy of this Nebraska Weed Book. This is probably, I don't want to downplay South Dakota, but this one definitely is one. If you don't have it, you might want to make sure it gets into your library, because I think it's pretty obvious just if you open it up, those color panels, nice pictures, good descriptions, any specialty things that you might need to know about the weed, and a smaller side panel, and then that black and white diagram to go with it that helps kind of confirm what you're looking at. So I'd really suggest, if you don't, just do a web search on Nebraska weeds, and I'm sure it'll pop up. Of course, I want to promote the South Dakota book. There are still copies around. It is not in color, but these black and white diagrams, I think, are pretty detailed, give you quite a bit of information if you're trying to identify weeds. This is an older publication, but if you can lay your hands on it, it's Weeds in North Central States. Still a really good book. What I kind of like about it particularly is that it will help kind of narrow down your search a little quicker if you've got some flowers on the plant, because it'll group by color, so purple or green or whatever. So they've got a key, so it kind of helps you eliminate some of those or ID some of those weeds just a little bit quicker. Probably you want some kind of a seedling publication. This happens to be Colorado State. You deal probably quite a bit in the spring in your jobs with trying to identify those seedlings. It's got a nice color panel again and some good description of those seedlings to go with it. So might be something you want to put in the library as well. And one final one, this is kind of a complete guide. It goes insects, diseases. It's the field scouting guide out at University of Illinois that we'd use quite a bit. Like I said, it kind of goes beyond weeds, but it does a pretty good job of covering all the things you possibly might be looking at when you're dealing with clients. So
one thing to mention while we're talking weed ID, and I apologize for the okay, all right, well I'll just kind of stand real close to Mark here. Have any guys seen the online weed ID things at all? Anybody ever mess around with some of those? They're getting to be a lot more you're going to be a lot more innovative, where, like kind of Mark mentioned, the flower color thing and that sort of stuff. If you go to the University of Wisconsin, they've got one where, they identify it as, they key characteristics, height, just different size type things. They give you like 10 choices. It's this big, the leaves are this wide or whatever. You check them down, and then it'll give you, okay, I think it's these 10 weeds right here. So University of Wisconsin has one that's fairly decent. That's one that comes to mind. USDA has a massive one. I think if you just Google USDA weed identification or something like that, it's like of course everything in government, it's like a 20-page document of, and it goes through all these taxonomic characteristics. You don't have to choose all of them. You can pick the ones you want and that sort of thing. But that's another. But the point is there's getting to be a lot of these more weed ID things, a lot more innovative online, where you can choose characteristics to help you identify them. But it is tough. They've got a long ways to go before they're really user-friendly. Main thing is we want to identify key characteristics to identify the plant families, and then that kind of narrows things down from there. So just want to add that, though. The online things are getting to be a lot more innovative. There's CDs out there that do the same type of thing, but they're still not really that user-friendly. So some drawbacks to those.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's good, Mike. Just chime right in. I've got a ID that you've already got a copy of this in your 3-ring binder you received yesterday, and I just want to review it with you real quick. We're not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on it because I think it's probably something you probably either have seen or it's pretty obvious, what we can do with it. But there's 2 different publications. I just bundled them together so that we could, just have them one, so you don't have to chase that paper all over the place, because the way the wind's been blowing around here, kind of hard to work with sometimes. But the very first copy, or very first publication you're going to run into is this actually is out of this Illinois crop scouting guide. It's one on identifying grassy weeds. The critical thing when we look at trying to pull those weeds apart is we're really going to look at the ligule. That's that small little either papery or feather or hairy a little appendage that's behind the stem, or you may not have one at all. But it's really a quick and easy way. If you pull that ligule out and we don't, if it's there, we can identify which one it is, or if it's absent, kind of puts us real quickly into the categories as far as the different weeds that we might be dealing with. If you go about 3 or 4 pages into the document, there is a key that helps you begin that process. And really the ligule will be the main thing that we will be looking for on those plants. So if you're bending the blade back, looking for whether it's hairy or has a membrane, or if it's absent, then we can go right away down to divide them into one of those 3 columns that you see across the top. So it's really a quick, nice way we can separate that out and find out which line that we want to follow down. So for instance, if we were to pull a sample apart this morning and it had found out that it had hair-like ligules, and sometimes those ligules are really fine. I mean, you really just have to kind of tease them out. A little hand lens will help you a lot. So I think you've got one in your with your materials yesterday. May come in valuable when you want to kind of look at that ligule a little closer. There is I don't know if there's any. We had one yesterday. I think it blew away, so I don't know exactly where. We had a foxtail yesterday, but
you guys, you guys have seen the ligule is that little collar on the leaf, and then there's those clasping auricles, the little finger-like appendages, and you guys, and I don't mean to jump in your mark, but like since you mentioned this, but like quackgrass, right? We always say quackgrass is one of the only ones that has those clasping auricles, right? You've all heard that, and this sheet will kind of run through that, and it'll kind of say, well, if you got clasping auricles, it's it's quackgrass. That's one of the only ones out there, but you got to watch out. There's others, and we're kind of standing around, a lot of different crops out here and that sort of thing. I was a crop scout down in southern Indiana one year, and there was this it wasn't me, it was another crop scout, but she was reporting, your field is infested with quackgrass. I mean, there is quackgrass. All, the crop scouting reports, quackgrass everywhere. You need to treat. I mean, it's really getting bad. The quackgrass is really getting thick, because she was seeing this grass all over this field with these clasping auricles. Well, it turns out that was wheat. It wasn't quackgrass. It was a wheat field. So you gotta watch out. There are other things out there. Wheat is one that has clasping auricles. There's fescues, that sort of thing. I've run into that in turf situations where people send in this weed, clasping auricles. That's quackgrass. You need to treat your lawn. And you're probably gonna have to spray it all off with Roundup. Well, it turns out it was a fescue variety that was supposed to be part of the seed mix, and so I quickly called back. No, don't spray your lawn with Roundup. It's fine. That's part of your turf.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I guess what we were showing yesterday with
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll pass. So this is an example of the ligule there as well. So things to watch for, I guess, is the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mike's going to pass it around. If you look at it, now that it's dried up a little bit, it's actually a little easier to see. Just some fine hair-like ligules that you'll see when it goes around. So, but you take that particular sample and then you tease it down to, whether or not that sheath has hair or not on it. There is a question here as far as like seed. Well, obviously we don't have any seed head to work with, so we're probably going to have to skip down to looking at the collar region and then make our determination. What we discovered with that one when we teased it out was it was green foxtail. So it's just kind of a real quick overview of how you take that down, use that ID key to pull down and find out exactly what those samples are. And the trouble with a lot of this is sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes it takes a little time, and experience is probably the best teacher, of anything when you're going to look at these particular plants and that kind of stuff. Experience is going to show you a lot. At times help you figure that out. So more you do it, the easier those keys become, and more second nature to identification is concerned. So that's how you'd use the vegetative key for the grassy weeds. Basically about the same thing for the broadleaves. It's the next publication that's in the handout. Little different because we're going to look at the petiole. We're going to look at, not the petiole, excuse me, the cotyledon and the true leaf. So your first leaf and your true leaf are going to be be examined in your hypocotyl, which is that part that emerges, and also the roots. So those are basically 4 characteristics that we would use to tease out a broadleaf. We may have different leaf structures. You can see there's a whole host of different structures that we might see. Give you some different definitions as far as what we'd be looking at. And then that following pages was basically just provide you with that information as far as looking for the broadleaf we're dealing with. A lot of these identifying, or some of them I should say, are identifying seedlings when you get done with them. Again, working with that situation, more experience, probably the easier it is for you to find these things. So just a 5-minute talk on this isn't going to turn you into a weed expert, but at least gives you a direction to head as far as trying to work with these guides and publications, figure out what it is your clients have is important. So any other comments, Mike? What we're going to do for about 10 minutes or so, we're going to do a little weed ID. So how many of you are ever in 4-H or FFA? Can we do weed ID in FFA? Yeah. No? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was saying no. So, so we're going to see, so you're FFA, we expect you to get 100%. Okay. And then Mike said he'd give you $100 if you got 100%.
That's right. That's the deal.
So, one of the things I guess we wanted to do with this is bring out some weeds from the similar families and maybe some of the problems that you deal with out on with your clients and that kind of thing. This basically on this end of the table, we kind of have the same members of the same plant family. They're all related together, even though they don't look quite the same. I mean, have obvious different characteristics on it. Number one, what did you guys say what that one was? Tumble pigweed, that's right. Probably not. I guess we didn't ask, where everybody's from this morning, but yeah.
Is it really? Are you guys seeing tumble pigweed get worse?
I can't kill it.
That's the thing, and that's kind of why we put some of these weeds out here. These are some of the tough, troublesome weeds, and so not that you guys have never seen them or anything, but yeah, it's not normally considered to be a real big crop weed. I mean, you look on the internet or whatever, and a lot of times it's considered to be a wasteland type weed, that sort of thing. But yeah, you get. I hadn't really heard much in the northeast part of the state, but certainly as you get in the central part of the state, sunflower country, getting a lot of complaints on this tumble pigweed.
Really that well.
Beyond won't? Okay. Yeah. All right. Spartan, I've heard, it must kind of struggle with it a little bit in flowers. So yeah, I mean, it's I mean, a lot of you guys, East River, wouldn't think twice about this one. Not a problem, but you just get, some of these are things to be watching for, and that's one. Okay, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah,
In wheat or Clearfield sunflowers
Well,
or?
I mean, I've seen it in the sunflowers when I got west, but in northeast South Dakota, like Marshall County, that's just very dominant now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else getting problems with the tumble pigweed? Okay. Where are you guys seeing it?
In the sunflowers and
Yeah.
in the soybean fields, where maybe in the low spots where it came up later.
Okay.
It all came late.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. So one of those goofy ones that's kind of getting to be more troublesome.
Go ahead, Mike. There's number 2.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't mean to.
No, go
I
ahead.
don't- What? Okay. 2. Shit, everybody's got this one right. This is sometimes things are. Sometimes, and I'll mention, like a lot of times I'll get mare's tail in or something like that, and you think, no, you think, oh, of course this is mare's tail, but you can't. Sometimes you can't always be too certain. Sometimes things seem too easy. Sometimes they are. But yeah, lamb's quarters there.
Trees right here. I'll just shift them up for you.
Oh, okay. 3.
Redroot pigweed.
Red root. Yeah, not water hemp because
Just not.
just not.
Kind of hairy cast of leaf.
Yeah, those.
Tiny leaf, and it's, there's just a lot of things as far as it's more of a rosette top and.
Sure. Almost don't see this one anymore though, right? I mean, this one's almost. Did you see it around a little bit? Yeah. Well, with all the water hemp, it's kind of.
Hybridized with water hemp.
Yeah, that's true. It can do that, and then you get those kind of quasi things.
That you can't kill with anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. There you go. Yeah, the bulletproof one. Yeah. But speaking of water hemp, how about the glyphosate-resistant water hemp? Not that that's water hemp, but spreading quite a bit this year. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people are adjusting though, and taking it. I mean, well, this year in the beans, and that's one thing we want to hit if we have time. We're doing a late burn down on water hemp on beans. That's kind of one of the big questions now. Can I still hit it with Cobra? That sort of thing. But pretty tough. We got options. I haven't been freaking out about glyphosate-resistant water hemp. I know it's a problem. It's going to get to be a bigger problem. But we've got the FlexStar, Cobra. Maybe some people like Cobra for water hemp. We've got options. Bottom line is we've got options there. So I haven't been really too concerned about the water hemp. But the key thing is to be watching for it and make adjustments early so we don't get those seed banks built up. This one here for Russian thistle. Yeah. It's you don't think of this as a thistle, and especially you guys eastern South Dakota, I don't see that around much. But Russian thistle, one of those background kind of nuisance things, I guess. Some herbicides kind of weak on this. The kick source stuff, sharpen, those types of things. I've had this do really well in those plots. So as kind of we switch over to some of these new herbicide chemistries, we get some of these kind of different weeds out there. Of course, you guys in the central part of the state, that's certainly not a different type of weed.
This is 5 right here.
Okay, 5. What do you got, Scott, for 5?
That foreign weed.
Foreign weed?
Can I say canola?
Canola?
It looks almost, but it's not.
No, not canola. So canola is in what plant family?
Mustard.
Mustard. So those are like winter annuals usually. I mean, canola is spring.
Spring
Canola can be a spring crop.
And it's not canola, I know it's
Yeah.
not.
Okay. But the mustards would certainly be flowering by now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It does. It looks goofy though, right? But what does it look like? I mean, if you had to guess, what does it look most like?
Kind of like a lamb's.
It looks a lot like a lamb's quarters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would. That would have been my guess. Anybody else? Anybody else nail this one?
It's not common or anything like that.
How about no? How about common orac?
Okay.
Common orac. Yeah, right. Who cares? But one of the things, and why we threw this on here, this, and then, well, we got this Russian thistle, and everybody got this one here, right?
Yeah.
Kochia, big problem. But one of the reasons why I put this, and while we're talking about this, how about number whatever this is? 17. Anybody get number 17?
Morning glory.
Morning glory? Oh, yeah.
Family.
Almost does it. What's that?
It's in the mint family.
Mint fan? Yeah, because of, why did you think?
The square stem.
Square stem. Yeah, it almost does have a square stem, but I almost, that's might just be kind of an anomaly with this one. It does look square, but that's a good guess. And that's what we need to do. I mean, you need to identify the plant family first, and then it's a lot easier to identify the species. But this is, oh, if I can do this without dropping it, maple leaf goosefoot. Maple leaf goosefoot. Yeah, you have no idea. But the thing is okay, so all of these are all in the same plant family right here, right? Right here. Russian thistle, kochia, lamb's quarters, orac, maple leaf goosefoot. They're all in the same plant family. And sometimes, you know, you get these oddball weeds and you think, well, what herbicide? Okay, for example, maple leaf goosefoot. What herbicide should I use for maple leaf goosefoot? Well, I don't, you know, who knows? But if you know that it's in the same, I mean, it's in the lamb's quarters family, then you might start thinking of lamb's quarters type herbicides. Maybe things like Harmony or whatever. Maple leaf goosefoot is not a crop weed. Orac, common orac, you might find in waste areas, you might find on the edge of a field, but not a common crop weed, of course. But the main point I wanted to make is that, you know, that's if we can kind of see similarities in some of these and identify the families, then we can kind of make some of those generalizations on different herbicides that might be effective. Of course, you always want to make sure the herbicide is registered for that weed to be sure, but that at least that gets us going a little bit. And all these, I mean, lamb's quarters, you guys know that's, I mean, once that gets big, it gets tough. It gets tough with glyphosate. See the same thing with just about all these. Once they start getting a little bit bigger, they get tough. Kochia, how many people dealing with tough kochia this year? Yeah, it just exploded, right, with the glyphosate-resistant kochia. I mean, it just, we first identified it in, 2009, and then it built up a couple of years, every year it built up a little bit. We get a few more confirmations, and then this year it just seems like it's almost everywhere. So the glyphosate kochia, that is a big concern. That is one of my biggest concern crop weeds out there. I can take the resistant water hemp. We can handle that. What are you going to do for kochia? What are you going to tank mix to control glyphosate resistant kochia in soybeans? It's not that straightforward. You're going to have to get out there early, that sort of thing. Cobra is what, post-emergence is what I'm guessing for post-emergence in soybeans. So that's fine. But you got burn downs and you got other things. You got residuals that you're going to need to use as well. Two big weaknesses with kochia as far as glyphosate resistance goes. To manage kochia, the two big weaknesses are, one, it's one of the first weeds out of the ground in the spring, right? And I know those buttons are hard to kill, but it's one of the first weeds out. So if we get a good burn down, that will really take us a long way, especially in no-till, for managing the kochia. But what are you going to do for a burn down? It's when you don't have glyphosate as an option anymore, what's next? 2,4-D might be a common. Even though you're ahead of soybeans, 2,4-D is common burn down herbicide. Not going to do much to kochia. We've had plots where we've sprayed 2,4-D, killed everything, killed the lamb's quarters, killed everything, but just kochia was just beautiful, just untouched. 2,4-D is just very weak on kochia, and it has been for a while. So I don't know if it's really resistant to 2,4-D or if it's just always been tolerant, but 2,4-D is not going to be an option. So then what are you going to do in your soybeans, right? I mean, you don't have, growth rate, dicamba, that's going to be pretty scary ahead of soybeans. You just don't have a lot of options. Maybe contact herbicides as your burn down. Maybe Cobra as a burn down, which is weird, but you could do that. Liberty, Ignite, if you can find it. It could be an option. I mean, those are going to be the weird things that we're going to have to start thinking about with burn downs. And then, okay, now you got your burn down, probably going to need a residual in there. Okay, and there's a lot of those, Valors, Authorities, all those. And then you got to control those escapes in your soybeans later on, and then maybe Cobra again later on for the escapes. So a real nuisance, but one of the key weaknesses that it emerges early, getting it in the burn down is going to be critical. The second weakness on kochia is that the seed bank has almost no dormancy. That seed is only going to live maybe a couple years in the soil, and it's going to be 99% gone after that. Now, we're not going to eradicate kochia. I mean, a little tiny plant will produce maybe 1,000 seeds. So you're not going to eradicate it because you can't control them all. But it could be possible to deplete that seed bank. That in the rotations, in the wheat, in the corn, that sort of thing, to deplete that seed bank in the rotations. That way, when you go back to the soybeans, you could control it with the pre and that sort of thing fairly well. And you don't have to rely on those post-emergence options, which we don't have. So the fact that it doesn't have a seed bank, we've always, nobody's been completely relaxed on kochia control. But the thing is in wheat and corn, we really got to get after this now. We really got to make sure we're really aggressive with this in the rotation crops. So when we go back to soybeans, we're not, we don't have that high seed bank to deal with because there just aren't very many good options. Liberty Link will control it, but nobody, that's a tough one. You got to do 2 applications, that sort of thing. So kochia, big one, but all these in the lamb's quarters family, tough weeds, even lamb's quarters can be pretty tough. We'll kind of move to some of these other ones fairly quickly.
8 to 9 to 30.
Number 8, anybody?
Which one?
This one right here. Common rag. Okay, no problem. Everybody's seen common ragweed. Well, how about this?
I got tons of it.
This here?
I'll let everybody guess first.
Biennial wormwood sage.
Biennial wormwood. Yeah, yeah. A lot of times people confuse us with common ragweed. That's why we put them both in there. And we got this big giant one in back. That's probably what a lot of people can see the big biennial worm, and you recognize it at that stage. But at this earlier stage, you might confuse it for common ragweed. But biennial wormwood, anybody have headaches with that one this year?
Well,
Yeah.
like the kick sort stuff, as far as that, just burns it off and then it comes right back.
Yep.
Whereas,
Right.
sharpen.
Right. But even glyphosate. I mean, it's always been tough to get with glyphosate.
If you ding it up with glyphosate, like with a kick saw or sharpen, then it's really hard to control. But it seems like if it's real healthy and growing, I run a rate and a half on it.
And you pick it up with glyphosate.
With a rate and a half.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments on the biennial wormwood?
How's 2,4-D burned down with it?
It should be pretty good. That should be a good.
That's kind of how we manage it in front of soybeans. We'll do the 2,4-D burn down and wait your week and
Okay.
that way.
And that's been good? Yeah, that should. Growth regulators are pretty hot on these in general. So you get it in wheat and corn. Growth regulators are kind of the standard for that.
A rate and a half of glyphosate seems to be.
Yeah, but it does. But I'm getting people complaining that that's not doing it anymore either. And now a lot of it is size. It's kind of like mare's tail. Once it gets a little bit bigger, it does get tough, and it's always been tough.
We got
But
to start mixing the bastard around again.
oh, I don't. Yeah, that's the. Well, see, I'm worried, and I don't know. We've got a biotype we're going to check this year for resistance, but I'm just wondering if we are maybe getting some resistant wormwood, which that would be miserable because what are you using soybeans? Basagran?
That's about it.
That's about it. So that I'm really nervous about this one be getting resistance. I mean, it's always been tough. It's always been tough, but that would be really scary to have this one resistant for soybeans. So, but the key is, you got to get it early, that type of thing. So,
He's got a cure.
you got to
Cold steel.
cold steel. God, you think people will do that? I mean, just tillage in the spring, but it can emerge late. I mean, this can be a late emerger.
Go back to cultivation.
I don't know.
I just know Basagran was okay, but wasn't great.
Yeah, I think NDSU did a bunch of research. I think you had to do 2 applications, like split applications, some goofy thing. It was just ridiculous.
An acre worth of Basagran.
Sure, and for marginal results. Yeah. This is good. This would be a
Courts of high
Really?
school kids in the acre.
yeah. High school kids.
Good luck with that one.
But that's we probably are getting to that point where some of these weeds we might have to go back to the cultivation, that sort of thing. But that is such a bizarre concept. I mean, even with the kochia, I was at one farmer's field this year, and we were talking, okay, cobra, all right, 15 gallons of water per acre, okay, and he's like, 15 gallons of water, that's just not going to happen. I mean, I'll maybe do 10, maybe, but 15, there's no way. And so, but that's where we're getting, and I think that's where a lot of people are at. I mean, to go above 5 gallons of water is that's ridiculous. So I think this problem is going to get a lot worse for a lot of people before they finally admit, okay, fine, I'll do the 15 gallons of water or whatever. So this is going to probably get a lot worse before it gets better, but people are going to have to just suck it up, and we're going to go with 15 gallons of water. I mean, that's, whether you're Liberty Link or you're doing Roundup Ready, that's the way things are going to be. It's going to be a little bit tougher with some of those weeds if we're using the contact herbicides. So, yeah, the mare, well, I kind of gave away mare's tail, yeah, a lot of resistant mare's tail, but we picked that up, growth regulators, that sort of thing. How about this goofy one? What is this, 7?
Mm-hmm.
It is milky. It's got milk in it. Could be a spurge, maybe, something. Milkweed. This is world milkweed, like world, like a corn world, WHORL. World milkweed. And Mark found this one up by Aberdeen. And the reason why I thought this would be cool to include, this year, dry conditions, people haying goofy ground, toxic weeds out there. This one's actually kind of toxic. I never hear problems with it. I don't think the densities usually get that high, but in hay, it could be one. But it's kind of one of those reminders. Kind of got to be watching. Some of those guys got to be watching some of those goofy weeds out there. Some of them can be kind of toxic to livestock. This one, was like 1 to 2% of their body weight. They consume that. Could be a near lethal dose. So it could be fairly toxic, but you'd have to get quite a bit of it out there. How about these guys? Bigger problem? No-till? Anybody got a solution for these? I don't. That's why I'm not setting you up for some grand Tordon. Yeah, Tordon. Yeah, we tried talking to Dow to maybe get triclopyr labeled for in-crop use to control the elms, but it didn't sound like they're too interested in that. I don't know. Fall Roundup 2,4-D. I have not heard of a good option for this.
We put some Authority Assist on some soybeans, and it really burned the hell out of it, but it wasn't a complete answer either.
Okay, well, the pursuit in there. Okay, all right. Well, this is a mystery. I don't know, but a lot of times, and this is your cold steel right here. I hate to have people abandon no-till for weeds, but this is one that may drive people to every once in a while till up their no-till, which makes me sick. But that's kind of where we're getting. This guy here, this twig. Hemp dogbane, one we don't see much anymore. I don't really have much to say on that one, but hemp dogbane, kind of a weird one out there. What do we got here? 19? Kind of that snaky looking one?
Scouring rush or nursery or something like that.
How do you kill scouring rush?
MCPA.
Yeah, does it?
That's about the only thing that really does anything to it.
Yeah.
And it barely
That's
does.
what I'm getting at. It's just like,
Have you not had good luck with MCPA?
it's been.
Yeah. Well, it's a perennial. It's a perennial, so you can burn the tops off with MCPA, but okay, great. But then, it's going to come right back. I mean, maybe repeated use. Maybe we could drive it back. We've been using MCPA a little bit and having some fair results, but yeah, it's really not going back. Another one with your cold steel. That's going to be the best. That tillage is going to be the best option for this, hands down. That's not going to wipe it out in 1 year, but repeat it. And I'm not anti-no-till. I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression here, but there's just not very many good herbicide options. Permit or Python are the two other kind of ones we talk about for this one. Python you could use in corn or soybeans. But one thing I found with Python is that it doesn't really have much activity on the top growth, but it does seem, at least some of our initial results are indicating, it does kind of inhibit new growth for whatever reason. So we were looking at like a MCPA plus Python type mix in the fall or the spring, and that maybe there's some options there. But that's a tough one there. Talking with Brian Hefty, he was apparently the railroads were buying a bunch of gramoxone one year, and he asked why are you buying so much gramoxone? They were using that to burn down the scouring rush. So I don't know. We just tried that this year. I got to go back and see how it's working. But gramoxone. I don't know. That's just word. That's just what I hear. I haven't tried it yet. We just tried it this spring. I go back and look at it yet, but I don't know.
Tillage just sounds bad.
Tillage. I mean, it is, and that's when I'll go through on the phone. I'll be like, well, you could do MCPA, you could do Python, you could do the mix, blah blah, blah, or just tillage. And a lot of times people are, all right, we'll just plow it, So, and it's usually in those wet areas, so it's not like you'd have to plow the whole field a lot of times. So, options there. Any other here? Were these ID'd?
No.
Nope, those are out.
Extras, but if you want to, there's something there. But those flags, I guess we were walking through.
And the giant ragweed.
Giant ragweed. Oh yeah, giant rag. Anybody getting giant rag around much?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah, we hit it with Roundup, First Rate, and Flex Star, and crop oil.
Gee whiz.
And it didn't die.
Oh.
Yeah, so
First Rate should be pretty good on it.
that's what we thought. And right afterwards, it fried up and everything, and then we came back a couple weeks later, and it was just green again.
Oh. So where are you guys? Are you in the Minnesota side?
Valley Springs.
Oh.
Tri-stated corner there.
Okay. All right. Okay.
There was one was a no-till field that we hit, and then the other one was regular till, but
Oh my.
yeah, it didn't. I mean, it phased it, but
Do you think it was just it got away on you a little bit?
yeah, it was definitely bigger.
Yeah,
It was too big
okay.
when we sprayed it.
All right.
So,
Yeah, you just don't see a lot around here. Thank goodness. But I'm sure it's coming. Minnesota, it's really built up the last couple of years.
yeah,
And
the one
some of these, there's always these goofy things. I used to help teach weed ID at one of the universities, and I won't mention it since we're on camera, but I always ask the professor, why don't we go on a weed walk? I know this other university, they'd always go on weed walks. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. There might be weeds out there I don't know, so we don't want to do that. So that's another option. Okay, let's we're going to be running out of time here real quick, so let's hit the herbicide stuff. The idea here with these herbicide things is we want to go through and be able to identify herbicide injury symptoms. Dry conditions really hurt us this year, so we got some interesting ones to talk about. And then I kind of want to go through some of these kind of mystery crop things to see if, after going through the injury symptoms, see if we can figure out what happened there. Okay. So this is kind of our typical herbicide screen here. We just planted soybeans, line of corn, and then we got sunflowers in back, and then wheat. The wheat was terrible. It really didn't come up with the dry conditions. So wheat will kind of discount. There are a few interesting things I want to mention with the sunflowers though, especially with these post-emergence herbicides. But these are applied post-emergence about a couple weeks ago. Usually about a couple weeks, kind of, you start getting the good injury symptoms. Some different things out here. 2,4-D. Oh gosh, everybody knows what 2,4-D injury looks like, right? I mean, that's not a mystery. It's those cupped leaves on the soybeans. That's a giveaway. But now look at my soybeans here. How much cupping do I have on these soybeans? And this is 2 weeks ago, and this was 4 ounces. 4 ounces of 2,4-D ester applied right over the top of these beans. Now we did have, and one thing I got to mention, we did have some rabbit damage, and so we see some clipped off plants here, and where we see these skips, a lot of that is just the rabbits, kind of took it out. So that's, sometimes that's not herbicide injury, so we got to kind of sort through that a little bit. But where's my cupping here for my 2,4-D? It's just not even there. Sometimes we'll see cupping on the edges, but I think the wind, I'm not sure if the wind was going that way when this was sprayed or not. But one thing I want to mention, sometimes the 2,4-D can be deceiving. If you apply 2,4-D right over the plants, a lot of times they'll just fall over like a wet noodle, and then they'll kind of bounce back up again, and you can kind of trace that back here. Some of these twisted stems, that sort of thing, we see that they're coming back out of it. Now if this was a little drift, those leaves would cup right up, right? But when you apply right over the top, sometimes they don't cup, sometimes they just bend over. Now a light rate will cause cupping, if tank contamination will cause cupping, but sometimes when we apply directly to it, we don't see the cupping. So kind of an oddity with 2,4-D sometimes, but we almost always see this. We rarely see cupping when we apply at least that much 2,4-D right on the top of the soybeans. So let's swing around here to the sunflowers, and then we'll kind of zigzag through here. There's a couple of things I want to mention with some of the other crops. This is 2,4-D ester applied right over the top of these sunflowers. This one maybe got missed here. But here we see this typical, see how the tops are kind of lit up bright yellow? Now if you were looking at that yellowing, you might think, oh, that might be glyphosate or something like that, right? I mean, it could be a dozen different things maybe. But we often do see that with 2,4-D in these herbicide injury plots, where it doesn't really cause cupping. It just lights up that center, and we're already losing the yellow color now, but we kind of killed that growing point, so that growing point is struggling. Those plants probably just eventually going to die. Sometimes you'll see a bunch of callus tissue develop around that growing point, but kind of an oddity. You don't think of 2,4-D quite like that. And like I say, a lot of times you will get the cupped leaves on sunflowers from 2,4-D, but a direct application can kind of cause some different things. And there we see that kind of yellowing and the growing point kind of dying. So kind of odd things to be thinking about. You don't want to get you don't want to get in that one-track mind with the cupping, that sort of thing. So kind of an oddity there. A lot of times Callisto does kind of hit the growing point maybe a little harder than the contact herbicides, and we'll see that in the soybeans for sure. But yeah, okay, so contact herbicide, and the plants are growing out of it. But as we're kind of going through, since we're talking Flexstar we think is a good, that's your water hemp herbicide right now, right? That's kind of our savior for water hemp in soybeans. It does have some grass activity though, and we see the firing on those leaves. Especially early on, it could be confused with like a grass herbicide contamination, like Select or something like that. But we distinguish between the two, where the contact herbicides will fire on the leaf tips going in, where Select and those grass herbicides will hit the growing point first. So we can kind of distinguish that, but we'll have some grass activity. So let's kind of zigzag on through here. A lot of people know Callisto, bleacher herbicide, you know, causes the bleaching, causes the whitening. If you were to come out here in these soybeans, I mean, this is a nice time. We're a couple weeks after the application. We got these snow white leaves. Pretty easy to diagnose this, right? Not a problem. But if you're out here next week, it's going to get a lot harder, right? Because that white color doesn't last very long. Pretty soon it'll just turn brown like that, and then it gets kind of, you know, oh gee, what did that? A contact herbicide? Liberty? What, you know, what would have done that? But one way we can kind of tell what's kind of distinct about Callisto is the way these lower leaves are just fine. You know, it just doesn't hurt these lower leaves. It really hits the new growth mostly. It doesn't translocate very well. And maybe you mentioned, you know, you see the regrowth sometimes in some of those weeds. It really does. It does really kind of concentrate on the new growth, and then the old growth can kind of survive. And these beans will grow out of this too, just like your weeds. I like Callisto. Bleacher herbicides are very good. I don't mean to say they're not, but yeah, you can with a light rate or something like that, little contamination, you can get some regrowth. So the bleaching is one thing, but I guess the main point here is the bleaching doesn't really last that long. So we look to the lower leaves, we see they look fine, and so then we got then we can tell that's Callisto, or any other bleacher, Lotus, Impact, Armazon, any of those other ones. But otherwise we got the weeds lit up, that sort of thing. Corn looks fine, it's corn herbicide, so those things are fine there. Contact herbicide, so this is a Flexstar, right? I can't see the sign, but this is Flexstar. Thing about Flexstar, a lot of times people, oh, you know, my beans are flowering. I look at the Flexstar label, I can still hit that water hemp. But man, when you get those growing, you get so many growing points out there. Yeah, we fried it a little bit, but this water hemp, now this is an oddity, of course. It's a huge water hemp, but late post, these things, you know, are going to be tough. That's going to be the transition as we get into these glyphosate-resistant weeds. We got to be out there early, and we're going to have a lot of water to get the coverage to control those weeds. But otherwise, Flexstar, again, we do see that firing, that contact herbicide. We see those speckling on the leaves, typical of the contact herbicide. But that firing is coming from the edges out, or coming from the edges in. If this is a grass herbicide, I mean, obviously we know this isn't a grass herbicide. You know, the whorl, we can't pull out the whorl, but we see nice growth, nice new growth. It's just that old growth, and you can just tell where that corn was when we sprayed it, right? And so, very typical of a contact type herbicide. This must be okay. I don't know. Anybody using Harmony out there? On wheat? Yeah.
Usually pick up buckwheat and soybeans.
Yeah, right. Or lamb's quarters and soybeans. My opinion is probably one of the best lamb's quarters herbicides there is for soybeans. But you get, you know, a lot of times, you know, you're out there spraying your beans. I need a grass herbicide. I got volunteer corn, need a grass herbicide. Well, now I need some crop oil or something like that. Start heating that tank up a little bit. You get a hot, humid day, and then you start getting some stunted soybeans after that Harmony application. So, what's that?
Well, the Affinity tank mix broad spec. I mean, it's got Harmony. We use it.
Yeah, Affinity broad spec, all those. Yeah, real popular on wheat. Are you mixing it with wide match or anything else, or just okay?
I've been hearing though for dandelion control, someone's been telling me that a half ounce of Affinity broad spec, basically prior to soybean emergence, is doing a good job along with glyphosate. You heard that or?
Oh, as a burn down thing? Yeah. Like Express now is more flexible for burn down applications.
They're just talking about how that basically a half ounce in with your glyphosate for dandelion control is doing great.
Oh, for dandelion?
Yeah, and I was curious if you've seen anything like that.
I haven't for dandelion control with Affinity broad spec. I haven't tried I tried the Express, and yeah, I'd say that's probably as good or maybe a little bit better than having 2,4-D in the mix. Yeah, I really like ALS herbicides for dandelions in general, but as a burn down, I haven't found a good silver bullet for dandelion burn downs yet. We've tried, we've had some trials out here and other stations. You know, it's hit or miss. I think it depends on the dandelion stand. The older stands are a lot more difficult. But yeah, I would say that'd be great. Yeah, as good as 2,4-D at least. So, if not a little bit better. But nothing's going to be perfect on that. Anybody else? ALS herbicides burned down for dandelions? Good. Okay. But yeah, the stunted beans on the Harmony. Otherwise, yeah, corn. It's gonna. Actually, the sunflowers back there. It would be hard. It's hard to see. Yeah, they're fried. One thing I'll mention. So Harmony is ALS herbicide. It did take out the sunflowers. Those are Clearfield sunflowers, ALS tolerant sunflowers, but obviously only for Beyond, not other ALS herbicides like Harmony. One other thing to mention, since we mentioned the Affinity Broad Spec, good on wheat, great for lamb's quarters, buckwheat, pigweeds, things like that. Not water hemp, but pigweeds. How about Affinity Broad Spec on kochia? Good? Yeah.
Never use it for kochia.
Never use it for kochia? Why not?
Match in there.
Why, yeah, you got the wide match for things like kochia. Yeah, most of our kochia is ALS resistant, right? And so not going to do anything to kochia. The first site where we identified glyphosate-resistant kochia in South Dakota, the guy's like, well, okay, I've had soybeans here a couple of years. Okay, and I see it's glyphosate-resistant. Next year I'm going to wheat. So what does he use in wheat? Just Affinity Broad Spec next year in wheat. How did that kochia turn out? I mean, now I just made the kochia even worse because it had no kochia control. They went back in and tried to do some rescue things, but you know that was pretty tough. So point is, really got to be careful in the wheat that we take out the kochia. Remember, that's also ALS resistant, so we gotta watch that seed bank. How do you identify a grass herbicide like Post? Corn, right? What about the corn? Well, it's gone. Yeah, this is really hot. I don't know why it was so hot this year. Normally dry conditions, it's not that hot. And I don't mean when I'm doing this, I'm not trying to wipe things out, but we kind of did there. But what else? What's the key characteristic on corn? I mean, other than it's kills the world, right? So you pull it up. Yeah, and you guys are pretty. You know, that's why a lot of that's pretty common. But you see that dead tip there, right on. You know, that'll just slide right out. But again, different than the contact herbicides where you see the firing on the ends of the leaf. This is gonna. You see those plants that are still alive there. It comes from the center out, right? So a little bit different there. So grass herbicides, a lot of you guys are familiar with those. Raptor, ALS herbicide, obviously my Clearfield sunflowers are gonna tolerate Raptor. Raptor is the same thing as Beyond. So they're gonna tolerate that pretty well. But I really like the corn stunting here for ALS herbicide. I mean, I don't like it. I mean, but very typical symptomology for the ALS herbicides. I mean, you look at this corn. I mean, it looks fine for the most part, right? I mean, it's just that it's smaller. And that's typical for some of these ALS herbicides like this. It just kind of makes them a little sick. I've got some leaves here that are maybe a little purplish. Sometimes you'll see some purpling on the stems, but just general stunting. Otherwise, everything looks fine. Sometimes we associate that with ALS herbicides. They can do that on things like corn. So,
Amy-tolerant corn in there.
Yeah, Amy-tolerant corn, right? Yeah. Anybody have that anymore? Anybody growing any of that? Used to be around, but Eastern Illinois.
When I worked with that Garth seed plant, they rebagged quite a bit of it.
Did they? The Emmy corn?
It's just, I'm sure it's stuff's been laying around their warehouse for quite a while.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but yeah, with Roundup Ready, it really kind of took some of those things out. Maybe they'll come back. So what's going on here? How do you identify Liberty injury or Ignite injury on soybeans? Obviously, looks pretty good, huh?
Yep. So
what's going on here? Turns out these are Liberty Link soybeans. we had, that was what we had on hand, and when we did this kind of a late planting, and so we just did Liberty Link. So you'll see the Roundup. Where's my Roundup? Down there a little way? Right here. Okay, yeah, obviously. Right. So low rate Roundup, 5 ounces. Stunting them, that sort of thing. Of course, Liberty contact herbicide again. Got to get those weeds early. But we do, I know people don't like Liberty Link, but 2 passes, Liberty Link, early post, and then a cleanup. We've had consistently some very good plots with 2-pass Liberty Link programs in soybeans. Get a pre out there, that sort of thing. They can work. They're not as consistent, but they can work, and we've had it can be done. So people don't even, with all this resistance, it's like they don't want to consider Liberty Link, but I would say people should because it's an option. Now, a lot of you guys heard Liberty. I mean, shortages of Liberty this year. Are you guys running into that? Yeah, that's seed-wise, you know, the good genetics are just as good as Roundup Ready yield-wise as far as what we've seen in our limited research on it. So, but you do have to really, you know, you really got to check, make sure that the seed yield is there. So, but contact herbicide, typical brown singe leaves, obviously, right? But then you get that regrowth, very typical of a contact type herbicide like Liberty. Roundup, I guess you guys have seen enough Roundup injury. Okay, so these are our pre's. These in red were all applied pre-emergence, and you could kind of take a glance and see nothing's really happening. We see these skips out here. These were caused by rabbit feeding, that sort of thing, not herbicide. So it was just been bone dry, right? And so these pre's, we put them down. We planted these crops, and then we put the pre's down so dry they're just sitting on the soil surface, not getting in there. But some of these I thought I'd try. Olympus Flex, for any of you guys doing wheat, it's a good cheatgrass herbicide for winter wheat, but it does have an 18-month rotation restriction to corn, 18 months. Now, normal rate is 3.5 ounces, I think. We're using just about a 3/4 rate, so it's a little bit lower rate, but obviously our corn, not doing too bad. But I think in a normal year, you'd see some yellowing, probably some stunting, kind of like we do for the Raptor, but just don't have any rain to get it in. So surprising to get no injury with some of those things. Balance Flex, pre-emergence on soybeans. Well, you'd expect to see some bleaching, right? Some stunting, but with gotta rain, right? Yeah, so all that herbicide just sat on the soil surface, did nothing. How about atrazine? How about a pound and a half, or I mean, 3/4 pound of atrazine? I mean, boy, you'd think that's not going to be too good on soybeans, right? But with no rain. But you know, we're trying to identify that. I'm trying to get light injury on the soybeans. Soybeans can tolerate about a pint. They can tolerate about a 1/4 pound. So if somebody does do a soil test, we want to do that 3 inches, upper 3 inches. And if you get less than 0.25 parts per million in the, you know, up in those 3 inches, then sometimes you can get away with soybeans, even with a little bit of atrazine residue out there. But so they can tolerate a little bit, but we're not seeing any injury. But what you would see with the atrazine, though, you'd see the yellowing on the leaf edges, right? Because atrazine moves with the water in the plant. So as though it concentrates on the edges where most of the water is leaving. So you'd see that yellowing on the leaf edges, maybe between the veins a little bit. That's what we look for atrazine injury if we can get some rain. So 2,4-D amine. So if I'm doing burn down, do I want to use amine or ester in my burn down? Ester. Why is that?
Not the weight as long.
That's why.
With ester, 14 with amine.
Why is that?
Amine hangs around a little longer.
Amine hangs around a little longer? Okay. Also, one's an oil and one's a salt, which is ester's an oil. And oils, what do oils do? They're going to stay on the soil surface a little bit better, and so they're not going to get into that seed. They're not going to contact that seed. If you would get rain, I mean, if that would ever happen here, a good heavy rain could wash the amine into the seed, into the kind of the seed zone, cause some injury. Or the ester is going to hang on the soil surface a little bit better. But you got to get that seed furrow closed. If you have that furrow open, hey, all bets are off. But it's kind of, you know, you think, you know, you think ester is hotter. So it's always surprising that the ester is actually better than the amine as far as crop safety for a burn down deal. But got to watch out. Sandy soils, got to watch out. This stuff can get kind of scary. Even in corn, I was talking to a guy here earlier this year. Had real sandy soil, low organic matter. They put 2,4-D down pre-emergence as kind of a burn down thing. That would be fine under normal conditions, but this year and with sand and that sort of thing, it really hammered that corn. And the corn just with no moisture couldn't grow out of it. So got to watch out. This is kind of a dicey thing. I mean, we can get away with it a lot of times. This is a crazy rate, right? I mean, normally a pint is where you want to be. This is 2 quarts. So I'm using the wrong 2,4-D at a crazy high rate and still getting away with it, but it's still dicey. A pint, you'd never go more than a pint for sure. Otherwise, you're going to be in that 30-day waiting window. But you got it is dicey. It's a dicey game.